Microsoft Dynamics 365 provides many tools that organizations can use to manage services provided to their customers. One of them is being entitlements. This module will discuss entitlements and how they can be used along with other record types to accommodate service management functions. In this module, the objectives are to apply knowledge to create and maintain entitlement templates, to create new entitlements from scratch and by using templates, define entitlement channels and how they affect the overall entitlement, clarify how products and cases can be added to an entitlement and what this does to the entitlement, to associate service level agreements with entitlements, and to activate and renew entitlements that are applied to cases. Entitlements are agreements that specify the level and type of support for which customers are eligible, as well as enforces those eligibility details. With entitlements, you specify the support terms based on the amount of time or number of cases. For example, when an entitlement is active, a customer might be entitled to receive a certain number of support incidents, or maybe a specific number of hours of technical support based on a specific channel of communication, such as Twitter, email, web, portal, and so on. Now, there are 4 key fields that are really important to understand as it relates to how entitlements are managed. The first is allocation type. The allocation type determines if the entitlement is based on the number of cases or hours consumed by the customer. The next is decrease remaining on. Here, you tell the system in what situation you want to decrease the allotments. Is it based upon case resolution, where the total number of entitlement terms is decreased when a case is closed, or case creation, where the number of entitlement terms is decreased when a case is created. Next, we have total terms. This represents total terms which have been purchased by any customer. For example, if 15 is entered, it will reflect either 15 cases or 15 hours, depending on the allocation type selected. And the final important field to understand on the form are remaining terms. This is the running total that is automatically calculated by Dynamics 365, which shows the remaining resource available for the customer on that entitlement. Now, as we talked about, the 2 allotment types are number of cases and number of hours. The number of cases specifies the number of cases or incidences a customer can use against an entitlement. Any case resolved against a number of cases entitlement will deduct from the number of cases remaining for that entitlement. The second type of allotment option is time or number of hours. With this allotment option, when created, it allots a certain number of time or hours available to the customer under the entitlement. Any case resolved against a time-based entitlement will deduct the amount of time spent resolving the case from the total time remaining for the entitlement. Another key thing you can do when working with entitlements, especially when you create them, is you can either create them like you do with any other record, or you can create them from a template. An entitlement template is a framework for creating new entitlements. They ensure that entitlements are consistent across the organization. Using templates is optional. However, one of the benefits of these templates is that it not only does it speed up the process for users to enter in the details about the entitlements, but it also ensures that they're consistent. Entitlement templates also specifies the allotment type, which cannot be changed in the entitlements if they are based upon the template. Allotment types are used when a new entitlement is created. In addition, the allotment specifies how the service is provided and tracked, such as how much time is allocated or how many cases are allotted, or if the service is for a specific time period, say for a year or a quarter or multiple years. As we just learned, your organization creates entitlement templates to cover the different types of entitlements and to speed up the process of creating them. Now, let's discuss how to create entitlement templates. When you design the entitlement templates, one of the things that you want to first enter is the entitlement template name. Now, it's important to know that while it seems like a very basic element of any record creation, as a best practice, it's always a good idea to be as descriptive as possible as it relates to the entitlement template. Next is a start date and an end date. Now, even though these fields are available on the template, generally speaking, start and end dates are not typically populated on the templates because the templates aren't actually entitlements themselves. They're just a template. When you design a template, you have the ability to restrict it based on entitlement terms. If this field is set to yes, once the customer has reached their limit, you will no longer be able to create cases for that entitlement channel. As another optional element to entitlement templates is users have the ability to associate service level agreements with these entitlements. In other words, if a customer buys a certain entitlement from you as an organization, perhaps with that entitlement not only comes a certain number of cases or hours to help, but a certain expectation of service. Another important element on entitlement template is the allocation type. As we talked about in the previous slides, the two allocation types are hours or the number of cases. And the final element when you design the entitlement template is to indicate when do you decrease the allotments under what conditions. In other words, do you want to decrease the remaining for case resolution or for case creation? And even though the fields listed are indeed important, the only required field is the entitlement template name. Now that we understand what an entitlement template is, let's walk through the steps of designing one ourselves. Okay, so to be able to create an entitlement template, what we want to do is, again, this is where we're going to find this under the settings, and then from under settings, we're going to go to service management. Now, you'll see as we scroll down that we do have entitlements here, but that's going to be more related when we want to create entitlements. If we continue to scroll down into our templates section, you'll see under our template sections, this is where we're going to create our entitlement templates. So what we want to do is, let's say for example that again, we actually have different types of support agreements that we can have available. And one of the ones that we have might be limited support to whether they purchase a product or again, as standard as far as when we do a first implementation, they get a limited number of support requests that we can have set up. So in this scenario, we're going to go ahead and we're going to tell it to create a new template. As we just mentioned, one of the most important things when you're creating that new template is to provide a template name. So on this one, we're going to call this Limited Support Entitlement. Now, again, looking at some of the other fields that we actually have available, and as we discussed, really the only required field we have on this one is to provide a name. But some of the other key fields, as we had mentioned on this one, is do we want to restrict based on entitlement terms? So on this one, we're going to choose yes. Now, again, you'll notice I specifically skipped over the start date and end date because, as we mentioned, with entitlement templates, we're typically not going to have start dates and end dates on the templates. We're going to do those on the actual entitlements that we create. Now, also from here, the other important thing that we want to do is we want to be able to go through and under the entitlement terms, this is really the meat of what we're going to be able to establish with what kind of support entitlements are we going to offer our customers. So again, from here, under the allocation type, this is where we can designate, is it going to be based on the number of cases or based on the number of hours? Again, for this one, we're going to do it based on the number of cases. And then again, we can also choose on how do we want to decrease when they've actually used one of those entitlements. So again, most of the time we typically want to say once we've resolved that case, we consider that case closed, that's when we're going to say that they've actually used that allotment necessary. Now the other important one, and this is probably one of the most important ones, is to say, okay, well, what is our terms? What are we going to offer as our limited support entitlement? How many cases or how many hours are we going to provide for them? So in our scenario, we're going to give them two actual cases that they'll have as part of this agreement that we have with them. Now, again, very similar to as far as some of the other record types that we have in the system. We're not going to talk about them right now. We're going to circle back and we're going to talk about these other ones here. But you'll also notice that, again, it goes back to if we want to set up different channels, I don't have that plus sign yet, nor do I have as far as the plus sign next to the products. That's not going to be available until I save my record. Now, once I save my record, if I wanted to set up as far as any channels or products, I could. But at this point, I now actually have my template set up, and that's all we're doing. We're simply just establishing what kind of agreement plan templates do we want to have available to offer our customers. Now that we've discussed what an entitlement template actually is, let's talk about the creation process for entitlements. When creating and working with entitlements, there are a number of fields that are important to understand. One of the key differences is entitlements require a customer being an account or contact in order to be created. Also, entitlements can be created in various ways, such as from a template, or we can start from a blank entitlement, or we can even renew a canceled or expired entitlement and then modify it appropriately to continue the service. Now, when a case is created, the default customer entitlement can automatically be populated on that case as long as it is enabled in the system settings. Also, keep in mind the entitlement will not populate the case until you save it. And lastly, while creating entitlements, a user also has the ability to choose whether or not to decrement the number of allotments and can be managed directly from the case record. In other words, as you're working with a case that's tied to an entitlement, if you decide that, for whatever reason, say for customer satisfaction purposes, you decide you do not want to decrement the element on that specific case. Now that we understand a few of the basic differences between entitlement templates and entitlements specifically with the creation process, let's go into the application and see how we can create these elements through a couple of different mechanisms. All right, so to be able to create entitlements, we're going to go back under our settings, and then from settings, we're going to go to service management. And then from service management, again, we're going to scroll down to the service terms, and you'll see that from the service terms, this is where we can create our customer entitlements. So we'll click on entitlements. All right. So once we get to our entitlements section, again, you'll see that we actually have our standard view. So if we have any other entitlements set up here for any existing customers, we would see this in the list. Now you'll also notice as far as in the command bar, we have some of the same commands or buttons that we've seen as far as within other views as well. But one of the things that you'll notice is with the new button, you actually have a drop-down arrow next to that to let you know that there's additional actions that you could be taken with when you select new. So in this scenario, we do want to be able to create a new entitlement, and let's say that this is going to be for Blue Yonder's Airlines. And we want to be able to create a new limited support entitlement for them. So from here, when I select choose from template, you'll now see I have all the different entitlement templates that I can select from, which just goes back to when we were talking about the importance of naming those entitlement templates. Why the name is so important is because this is what they will see when they're creating new entitlements for their customers. So you want to make sure when they're looking at the name, they know exactly what kind of support agreement we're actually setting up for that customer. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to select our limited support template. And once we do, this is where you'll see that we're going to actually have our entitlement form where we can create a new entitlement for Blue Yonders. All right. So once we're in the actual form, again, you'll notice that we have several required fields that are necessary as we discussed in previous slides. So the first thing we want to do is we want to give it a name. So in this one, we're going to call this our Blue Yonder Limited Support. And as far as our actual customer, again, this is where we're going to choose Blue Yonder. All right, so we choose Blue Yonder, and now again, this is where you'll see that unlike a template, that for when we're creating entitlements for our customers, a start date and end date is a required field. So this is basically saying how long is this agreement going to be in place? So this goes back to, if we wanted to, we could also, as far as with the name, we might want to include how long that this is actually going to take place. So let's say that I actually did this as being their annual limited support. And then in this scenario, I might actually have it where my date is going to be from the first of the year to the end of the year. Now again, you'll notice also some of the fields that I actually have on here that are marked as being required are automatically populated. For example, restrict based on entitlement terms. It's automatically set to yes because that is one of the things that I set up on the actual template. The other thing you'll see is under the actual entitlement terms, allocation type is automatically selected, case resolution is selected, and then total terms is also automatically marked for us. So really the only information that I had to go in and configure for this particular entitlement for this customer is the name, assigning it to the customer, and then assigning how long is this support plan going to be in place. So once I've done that, from here I'm actually finished for this particular one. Now again, just like with templates, you'll notice that I can associate different channels and products and even contacts, which again, we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. So even with contacts, if I wanted to have it to where I wanted to limit who has the ability to submit support cases, I could even go in and set up contacts to be able to streamline the process so that I don't have 50 different people trying to submit support cases to us. I can actually have it where there's a stream of information flowing to us so that we don't accidentally have duplicate cases like we've discussed in other sections. So again, from here, once I click on the save icon, you'll see it will actually save that record. And like before, once we save the record, we have the ability, if we wanted to associate different channels, different products, or even different contacts, we can associate them to this particular entitlement. Now, once we've done that, just like with the actual templates or with some of the other service records that we have within the system, this plan will not become enabled until we go in and we click on the Activate button. So when we actually want to tell it, yes, this now plan is taking place, we click on the Activate button, and then from here, you'll see that we can confirm this, activate it, and now, once it's active, we can now use this entitlement as we work on cases for Blue Yonder. So once we go back, we're just going to go back to the entitlements view, and just to show you, you'll see that it now shows that we have an entitlement for Blue Yonder, what the terms date are, and then what the term agreements are. So it makes it a lot easier so that now whenever Blue Yonder submits a case, we can see that we can actually apply these entitlements against those cases. Another key feature of using entitlements, while optional, is the ability to restrict the usage based upon different entitlement channels. But what is a channel? When designing your entitlements, one or more channels can be identified that details the coverage that will be provided for a specific product or item. These support channels are essentially mechanisms that your customers or clients can use to submit or request help with questions or issues. So let's say that we offer the ability to email, call, or even submit a request for help from a web portal, or even Facebook from some customers. Each of these options can be considered a channel. Channels consist of a variety of different activities, such as phone calls, emails, web, Facebook, or even Twitter. So these entitlement channels essentially allows you, through the entitlement, to control the number of cases it can use for each one of these support channels. Within Microsoft Dynamics 365, channel allocations can be defined on an entitlement. They can be configured to identify a specific number of entitlements per channel. In other words, a customer can have a total of 10 allotments, such as number of cases on an allotment or on an entitlement. Of those 10 allocations, they can have 3 phone calls, and let's say 4 website-based support requests, and maybe 3 email-based requests. Now again, as a reminder, it's important to note that channels are an optional feature for an entitlement and are not required to provide support for a customer. When we associate these entitlement channels with our entitlements, these entitlement channels define different channels that a customer can use when they create a new support case. So when we create the support case, it's important we populate the case origin. Did it come from the web, or email, phone, or Twitter, and so on? Now when we associate these entitlement channels with our entitlements, these channels also define how many terms they can use on each channel. For example, let's say that we have selected 6 total terms. This means that a user can create 6 total cases from any type of support channel. Now, if I wanted to restrict users from creating cases via social media, such as Facebook or Twitter, then I would select 0 for the total terms of those 2 channels. This means the customer does not have the ability to submit cases through social media and will require to submit it through a different supported channel type. Now, if you do not specify the channels, then you're basically allowing cases to be created through any channel. Keep in mind, you can also relate entitlement channels and products to entitlement templates. Again, for example, we can create a template for a standard entitlement that outlines which channels they can submit cases, and then apply this template to every standard customer in your organization. All right, so when we talk about entitlement channels, let's say that again we actually have this existing entitlement that we have for Blue Yonder annual limited support. And let's say I want to restrict it that they can only submit cases through one of the certain channels that we have set up. Now as a reminder, with like several other record types that we have within Dynamics 365, before we can modify this record, because we activated it, we have to deactivate it first. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to deactivate it temporarily so we can look at as far as how we can go in and set up different support channels. All right, so now that it's deactivated, I actually have the ability to go in and set up entitlement channels. So again, because it was saved, you'll see that under the entitlement channels, this is where I can now create them. So in going through and setting this up, let's say I want to be able to have it to where they could either do it through phone, web, or email. So when I go in and click on the plus sign, you'll see that I actually have this subgrid in here. And within the subgrid, I can now choose how many terms I want to use. So let's say that if they wanted to, let's say they could actually do as far as total terms being 2 for phone, let's say for email, we'll also allow them to do up to 2. And let's say for the web that they can actually submit through the portal as being 1. All right, now when you look at this, I'm sure you're looking at this going, well, wait a second, because when we take a look at all 3 of these different channel types, it obviously adds up to a lot more than what we have on their total terms. But again, what we're doing is when we're actually setting up the channels, we're specifying what the total number of actual cases and how they can submit them through the system. So what this means is that, let's say for example, if they wanted to, they could submit 1 support case via email and 1 support case from a phone, or they might do 1 through the phone and 1 through the web, as long as it does not exceed the total terms. But let's say that if they actually try to submit 2 cases from a web portal, then they would actually be in violation of that entitlement channel. Now where this is really helpful is a lot of times, let's say that we actually do have a customer portal that we have set up and we're trying to encourage more of our customers to submit their support cases through that portal. So we might actually have it to where almost that we want to encourage it. So we might have more of them available to go through our web portal than we actually want going through email support. But again, all that does is say this is the maximum number of cases they could submit through that channel. So again, once I have that, I can actually save that record, and then just like before, I can go ahead and I'm going to activate this again. So that now when Blue Yonder wants to contact us, we now have limited that they can contact us and be able to use this entitlement using one of these 3 channels. A key reason we create entitlements is to allow our customers to log support cases and then track how many cases they've used against a certain entitlement or service contract. So let's take a look at how this might work. Users have the ability to associate any of their cases to entitlements as long as the customer has an active entitlement. Now, in this process of resolving cases, we know activities can be tracked, which in turn enables us to determine the total amount of time spent on the case at any given time, as well as to see a breakdown of how that time was spent. If the entitlement is associated to a case, the case resolution will automatically deduct the time or incidences from the remaining allotment for that entitlement. What defines which one is used is based on the allotment type, which was actually established when the entitlement was initially created. In addition, from the case, you also have the ability to check Do Not Decrement the Entitlement Terms action. Just as it's named, for an associated entitlement, terms will not be decremented for the selected cases. Again, for example, let's say that we have a customer that has an entitlement attached to their record. As soon as they enter a new support case, case 1, and activate it, it's possible to open the case record and see that an entitlement is attached to that customer. Also, directly from that case, we already know who the contact is, where to bill the support hours to, the start and end dates of the entitlement, and what channels are associated with this. Now, once the case is resolved, it will automatically be deducted from that entitlement. So let's go into the system and see how this process actually works. All right, so again, we actually have this entitlement out here for Blue Yonder. The question is, though, how is this going to be applied to a case? So let's do this. Let's go under Service, let's go under Cases, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new case for Blue Yonder Airlines. All right, so again, our customer is going to be Blue Yonder. And then from here, let's just say that they contact us because their system is down. So again, I'm going to change the origin. Let's say that we're going to do this through email. But then this is also where you'll notice under the case details, as I continue to scroll down, this is also where you'll see that I now have this entitlement lookup. So I can come in, I can click on the lookup button, and if this customer has an active entitlement, you will see that it would automatically be available to associate to this case. So from here, you'll now see that I actually have that entitlement. Now, watch what happens. Let's say, for example, that it's not for Blue Yonder and it's actually for, let's try that again. Let's say that this is for Coho Winery. So now when I go in, I choose Coho Winery and I click on my entitlement, you'll notice that it doesn't have, or Coho Winery at this point does not have any available entitlements against it. So again, when we actually go in and we select a customer that has it out here, within that entitlement, this particular one, we're doing it manually. But again, if we actually go in and we'll talk about this in just a second, if we set it as default, it'll automatically add this entitlement to each case. In this situation for right now, we're just going to show what happens when we actually have this as being a manual attachment to a case itself. So again, I now actually have that set up. I'm going to go ahead and save this record. And once I go through and I'm actually saving the record itself, we can actually scroll down, and because again, on the case form, which we talked about when we reviewed the case form itself, that there's actually a section for us to be able to see entitlement details for that customer. Okay, so now that the case is resolved, again, if we scroll back down and we look at our entitlement section, again, you'll see that we have the entitlement name, but now when you look, you'll notice our retaining terms is down to 1. So now notice what happens also if I come back and I tell it to reactivate the case, because the system still was not working as it should be. Once I go through and I actually tell it to reactivate the case, and we go back and we look at our entitlements, you'll see that it actually moved it back to being 2. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and again, let's see if we can resolve this. All right, so let's say that we have that one resolved. And again, I'm going to go ahead and just close that, and we're going to just create one more. So let's say they call in with another issue. So again, go in, we select as far as blue yonder. This one's related to printer issues. And then from here, you'll notice also right from the quick form, the quick create form, I also have the ability to associate an entitlement to this. So as soon as I go through and I actually create this and I save it, once I save it, we're going to go in and we'll take a look at the record. And when I go and I take a look at the record, you'll now notice that I will not have another entitlement. But again, I won't have that until I actually save the record. So again, that's actually part of the process as far as going through and getting caught up. And then if we went through and we actually created a third one, you would actually see that you get a message saying that you cannot associate this case to an entitlement because they're out of terms. So again, as you're going through and each case is being created and there's an entitlement associated to that case, automatically it will start decrementing the number of terms available as those cases are saved. And then once they are resolved, it will then go through and actually decrement to the next one. So again, we're going to go through. I'll resolve this. So that now that it's been resolved, you'll now see I have 0 remaining left. But now let's say that they call in with yet another one. So again, we're going to do one more. And then, so we'll do this for our blue yonder. And again, we're going to associate this to our entitlement. And now this time when I try to save it, you'll now see this is the error that we were talking about, that it's letting you know that the reason we cannot associate that is because we told it that we want to be able to enable the terms that we have on that entitlement, and it's letting us know that we have no more available terms. So again, this is all an automatic process that we can have when we have entitlements attached to cases. We know that you can specify the amount of support in terms of support hours or number of cases. In Microsoft Dynamics 365, you also have the ability to restrict entitlements based on specific conditions such as limiting support to a specific product or to a specific list of products. The customer support level can vary based on the product or the service that the customer has purchased. So customers who have purchased different products can be entitled to different support levels. This information helps the customer agents verify what the customers are eligible for and create cases accordingly for them. Similar to entitlement channels, you can choose to associate an entitlement to a product. For example, let's say that we're working with the Litware M500 tablet. The specific entitlement would only be displayed as an available option if the case is related to the Litware M500 tablet. You can specify service level agreements, or SLAs, to an entitlement record to provide different service levels to different entitlements. SLA and entitlements help your customer service team deliver on your customers' high expectations with configurable and measurable service level agreements. If you choose to, you can associate the appropriate service level agreement to an entitlement. Now, an organization can have different SLAs, as we've previously discussed, such as Platinum SLA, a Premium SLA, or even a Standard SLA for different customers. By associating different entitlements, users can distinguish service level agreements for different customers. In Microsoft Dynamics 365, you can also use Entitlement Templates and Entitlement Template Channels to create entitlements pre-filled with the basic information, like the start date and end date, service level agreement, allocation type, and total terms. Let's walk through how to associate an SLA to an entitlement. All right, so back in Dynamics 365, we're going to go ahead and again, we want to talk about as far as associating an entitlement or associating an SLA to an entitlement. So we're going to go in and we're going to create a new entitlement. So we're going to go back to Settings, go back to Service Management, and we're going to create a new entitlement. So let's say on this one, it's going to actually be for Coho Winery, because they've actually had enough support cases that they decide that they actually want to be on some type of support plan. So we are going to go ahead, we're going to create a new blank entitlement. This time we're not using a template because this is going to be different than the limited support plan. So on this one, we're going to have this as being Coho Winery, annual support. And of course, our customer is going to be Coho. And then again, our start dates and our end dates that we're going to have is just going to be for this year. We do want to restrict the entitlement terms, but now also this is where you'll see that we have the ability to go in and associate an existing SLA. So if we have that one that we have set up already out there, which is our default enhanced SLA for all of our customers, I can now assign it for Coho Winery. And then of course, just like any other entitlement, I have the ability of going in. We are going to do it based on number of cases. And again, we're going to do it based on as far as to decrease the remaining amounts based on case resolution. And let's say that we want to give them a total of, let's say, 12 cases a year. So again, once we actually have that, I can actually save this entitlement. And then of course, we want to activate it. All right, so once we have it activated, now what we want to do is we're actually going to go through and let's see what happens when we have that SLA that's associated to that entitlement. So we're going to go back to cases. We're going to create a new case. And we're going to do this for Coho Winery. And let's say that they're having some tablet issues over at the winery. And then from here, again, once I have it set up, I'm going to select their actual entitlement. And then I'm going to save the record. Because now, once I save the record, as we talked about, when we actually have the SLA, as soon as I now associate that entitlement, which has a service level agreement automatically associated with it, now if we go down to, we look at our enhanced SLAs, you'll see that automatically it is now tracking to make sure that we're meeting those customers' expectations by going through and completing this case in the timely manner that we agreed upon. But then we'll also have the entitlement. So again, just like everything else, when we look over in our entitlements, you'll see that it's counting as far as those remaining terms. And once we resolve this case, it will then decrease that total number down to 11 and allow them to submit 11 more cases till the end of the year. As we've seen, once you have completed all of the required criteria and optional information for creating the perfect entitlement, you must activate it. Similar to products, if you do not activate an entitlement, it cannot be utilized. Now, if the start date and end date of the entitlement both fall in the future, the status of the entitlement is set to waiting. Once the start date arrives, the status automatically changes to active. Also, if the end date is in the past, the entitlement is automatically set to expired. For example, I just created an entitlement for a customer that will be applied starting tomorrow. Currently, the status is set to waiting. When tomorrow comes around, I can actually go into Dynamics 365 and check the entitlement and verify that the status has been set to active. In addition, activated entitlements cannot be edited, but users can deactivate an entitlement if it needs to be modified, and then activate it again once the modifications are complete. Let's talk a bit about the entitlement lifecycle and what the different statuses are. An entitlement will always have one of the following status values. The first is draft. As an entitlement is first created, it starts in draft mode. When it's in draft mode, it is still editable. However, because it's not active, cases cannot be aligned to them. Now, let's say I created a draft entitlement and the start date was tomorrow. When I click on the Activate button, the status will be changed to waiting, because if you think about it logically, the contract that we agreed to, the entitlements that they paid for, really don't kick in until tomorrow. Now, on the status of waiting, it can no longer be edited and cases cannot be tied to the entitlement. Once an entitlement has reached the status of active, though, we still can't edit it, but at this point, we can add cases to it, as long as we have allocations available. Now, if it's in a waiting or active status, entitlements also have the ability to be canceled. When they are canceled, no edits can be applied to them, and of course, no cases can be tied to it because it's no longer applicable. However, canceled entitlements rather can be renewed. The other option as far as the status goes is that these entitlements can expire. So if the end date of the entitlement was today, and tomorrow we view the entitlement, we would see it's expired. With an expired entitlement, no edits or cases can be performed on this. However, just like with canceled entitlements, expired entitlements can also be renewed. Now that we know the different types of statuses for entitlements and the entitlement lifecycle, let's look at how they actually look in the user interface. All right, so in taking a look at the different lifestyles, again, we have a couple of entitlements that are already out here. Let's go through and then we're going to create a new one. And let's say that Blue Yonder has decided that they want to expand their support that they currently have. So we're actually going to create a new one for Blue Yonder. All right, now in this situation, let's say that the actual support plan does not start until tomorrow. So we're going to go through, we're actually going to set the start date for tomorrow, and we're actually going to just start this to have till the end of the year. Again, we're going to set it based on terms, and we're going to go through and set up our total terms. And on this particular one, they want to be able to have 24 cases. Now, because my start date is not set to start until a later date, in fact, let's actually set this for being 1 month. We'll start that on December 1st. Now, as soon as I click on the Save button, again, I could go through, I can set up as far as if I want to have other channels, contacts, products as we've discussed. But now, let's go back in, and now as soon as I activate it, once I activate it, you'll see that the process will actually go from, the status will go from draft to now waiting. And again, it will stay in waiting until we actually hit that start date. So to kind of show you the difference is, let's go ahead and we're going to deactivate it so we can edit it. We're going to go back, we're going to change the start date to being today's date. And then from here, again, we're going to reactivate our entitlement. And once we do, you'll notice that the status, once it's become active, you'll now show that once we hit that start date is now considered an active entitlement. But now what happens as far as when we've actually reached the limit of that support plan? what's going to actually happen to the status of this particular entitlement. So again, I'm going to go ahead and just deactivate it. And let's say that we actually had this for a while, and it was set to expire yesterday. So again, now watch what happens. As soon as I go in and I activate it, we'll notice that the end date has already passed. And so again, the system, once it realizes that end date is out there, you'll see it changes the status to expired, which means once it's expired, I don't have the ability to use this entitlement on any new cases that Blue Yonder submits to us. When an entitlement has expired, there's a choice to be able to renew it. If you renew it, Microsoft Dynamics 365 will retrieve all parameters and information from that expired entitlement and populate in the new entitlement form. It will also analyze the valid date range in the expired entitlement and set the new valid date range on the new entitlement form. Therefore, when you choose to renew entitlements, instead of creating new ones for the existing customers, it saves a significant amount of time. Let's take a look at what the entitlement lifecycle would look like upon renewing an entitlement. All right, so with our entitlements, as we've just discussed, the one that we actually had for our Blue Yonder annual support, you'll see that is actually set to expired. Again, we had the start date of being January 1st, our end date being yesterday. Now, in going through and actually looking at this, this is also where you'll see within this entitlement, I can go through and I can actually tell it to renew it. Now, once I renew it, again, what it's going to do is going to take all the parameters that we already have on the existing entitlement, and you'll see that it will reset it. But now what it will also do is, if you look at the start date and end date, is that's again where it will take a look and calculate based on the original start date and the original end date, and be able to calculate what those new dates should be. So again, this is also why it makes it nice is for when you're dealing with different support dates, we keep them a little bit more consistent, but sometimes depending on an organization, we can actually have some variety with those two dates. So again, it will actually go through, update our start date and our end date, and then at that point, just like with any other entitlement, I can activate it. And of course, as long as that start date is today or earlier, it automatically becomes active and can be applied to any new cases that come in. As we've discussed, organizations have the ability to create entitlements, and entitlements basically indicate the number of allotments you're going to give your customers. Now, this could be thought of essentially as a service contract where they pay for your services. And when they pay for that, you're defining how many cases do they get, or perhaps how many hours of support or help do they get from your organization. Additionally, we also talked a bit about how you can leverage templates and even service level agreements and tie those to entitlements. Essentially, the use of templates make it faster and easier and ensures that you are consistent with the creation of your entitlements. Also, with the use of service level agreements, organizations have the ability to indicate to their customers when they're selling these entitlements what level of support or help they can expect from us. In this module, the objectives were to apply knowledge to create and maintain entitlement templates, to create new entitlements from scratch and by using templates, define entitlement channels and how they affect the overall entitlement, clarify how products and cases can be added to an entitlement and what this does to the entitlement, associate service level agreements with entitlements, and finally, to activate and renew entitlements that are applied to cases.